I'm Pat Cruz. I'm the artistic director and CEO at Harlem Stage. And mostly I'm just a fan of great art. So here we are. Take it away, Beth.
Hi, Pat. It's so nice to be here with you and so nice to share this time with all of the people that are participating and here with us. And of course, our incredible composers. We are so looking forward to co-presenting Song Cycles with Harlem Stage, which is going to have its premiere Friday, October 28th and Saturday, October 29th at the Harlem Stage Gatehouse at 150 Convent at 135th Street. You can get your tickets if you haven't, and you should, because they're going very fast at harlemstage.org. Just another little housekeeping thing. I want to make sure that people know that at the end of this, we're going to invite questions. You can drop those questions into the Q&A feature at the bottom. There's a button there, or you can pop them into the chat. We're going to be monitoring both of those things, and excited and happy to welcome you here and to talk a little bit about the work we're going to be doing. So Pat, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about Harlem Stage.
And I appreciate that. I'm really excited about this. For those of you who don't know, Harlem Stage is almost 40 years old. We're about to celebrate a big anniversary. And what I love about us is that we've really been devoted to the same mission, which is why I came here when I came, which is to really support the development and presentation of extraordinary visionary artists of color, artists who have really developed new work with new visions and have responded to issues of social justice in ways that are part of their DNA. It's not something that we impose. And dive deeper, it allows us to kind of go beneath the skin of the surface of what the works that we're doing. And we're so happy that you all are here with us for that. So with that, that's who we are, and that's what we've been doing for a while now. Beth, you want to talk about what how?
Yeah, sure. So BMP, Beth Morrison Projects, is 17 years old now, and we have been devoted to commissioning, developing, producing contemporary opera, theater, and music theater projects that push the boundaries of what the art form can be, that bring us into a space of exploration, and always with the artist kind of leading the charge.
Yeah.
We also have been devoted from the very beginning to bringing historically marginalized voices in opera, which also includes women, to the fore. And so we've championed women composers and composers of color from the very beginning, as well as, of course, other artists, directors, and designers as such. But for us, it really kind of always starts with the composer. And I consider really myself personally as a composer's producer. That's how I've sort of always thought about myself. In addition, we have our festival Prototype, which we founded 10 years ago with our partners here, Art Center. We'll be celebrating our 10th anniversary of our festival in January. So we're super excited about that, and really thrilled with this partnership, which we'll also talk a little bit about a little bit more later. But I want to just talk a little bit now kind of about the idea behind this program. And, we're titling it Song Cycles, which seems very basic in a way, but is very, actually, there's a point to it. And I'm gonna draw back a little bit on something else that BMP has done almost from the very beginning, which is something called the Liederabend, which is in German, song night. And we kind of wanted to bring that tradition of the Liederabend into our contemporary culture. And that's kind of how I felt about the same thing here with Song Cycles, that it's not something, it's not a form that is being focused on right now. We still, of course, have the amazing song cycles from the canon, from Schubert, from Schumann, that people still sing today. And of course, there are contemporary song cycles. Maybe I should say what a song cycle is. A song cycle is a series of songs that form a collection that are one thing. They're not telling many different stories. They're telling one story that may be told in many different ways, but that it has one point to it, and that it's sort of its own book, if you will. And so that's kind of why I'm wanting to bring these sort of more sort of archaic, in some ways, traditions into our contemporary culture, to try to keep contemporary classical and classical alive, and not only alive, but like changing and developing. So bringing these amazing artists to this form is very much in line with what that mission is. Why these artists? Like I said, BMP has been championing women composers from the very beginning. We've also been championing composers of color from the very beginning. And it became evident to me a few years ago that we had never commissioned a Black woman or non-binary composer. And I was shocked, embarrassed, and mortified by that. And so we thought, let's start this project, the Song Cycles project, where we can invest in 3 extraordinary composers that we will then hope to go on and create larger works with over time. And so that's sort of the genesis of how this idea started. We, of course, approached Harlem Stage, which we can talk about a little bit later about why that seemed like the right thing, but it felt really good. So yeah, so maybe I don't know, maybe we just talk about that now, Pat. So we've been trying to find opportunities to work together on an event for a long time. I have admired Harlem Stage and you personally for years, and your commitment to social justice and the progress of Black artists and other artists of color is so important. It's always been important. It's still important. We have to keep shining a focus on it. And the collaboration just felt like such a natural one with this program. One of the composers, Tamar Cully, you've worked with many times. And it just seemed like a good opportunity to see if we might come together finally. So
I absolutely agree, Beth. And it's so amazing when you talk about existing for 17 years and we've known each other and you're just kind of passing ships. And one of the things that's wonderful about these collaborations, and we're so glad that you came to us with this, because we believe that a part of what we do is, and it's for our audiences, but it's for us as well. Collaborations and partnerships like this allow us to discover artists, and we talk about discovering the new at Harlem Stage. And that's what we want to do. And we learn in this process as well. So I think it's about time that we do it. And yes. I think, as you've said, you've discovered that you hadn't presented Black women before. And I think one of the things that Harlem Stage has done as we introduce artists is we're seeding the field so that other producers, presenters, not only in New York, but from around the country, can know about these extraordinary artists. So we're thrilled to do this, and we will not let this be the last time we do it, Beth. Okay,
no,
so
absolutely not. No, absolutely not.
that's our commitment. So with that, I think what we should do is go ahead and bring these incredible visionary artists on so that we can see them and hear from them.
Please, 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 please. Awesome. Please go ahead and turn your cameras on.
Great.
Wonderful. I'm going to turn it over to Tanya Rodswa to kick us off and to tell us a little bit about you, who you are, where you're from, and anything else that you might want to share with us, along with the title of your piece.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Tanya Rodswa Tawengwa. That's my government name. And then my ancestral totem name is Nzo Mambano. Nzo means elephant, and Mambano is the honorific name given to women of my clan. I am from the great nation of Zimbabwe, also known as Zimbabwe. And yeah, I just want to begin with a thank you. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Pat, for really opening up space for me to, share who I am, share my voice with a capital V. It means so much. I feel like for the longest time in my artistic journey, I spent a long time looking for that voice, and I found that voice, and to feel supported in that voice is really, it's really moving. So thank you. So my piece is called Marimuka, and Marimuka means the wilderness, and it talks about it's a kind of philosophical concept we hold in our indigenous Chivanu culture, that on your journey in this life as a spirit, you will encounter many wildernesses.
Mm.
And in these wildernesses, this is where you will prove yourself. These will be your rites of passage.
I love
And
that.
so, yeah. And so this piece, Marimuka, speaks about what, for me, I feel was one of my first rites of passage, which was leaving my home of Zimbabwe and coming to the United States. And so, in that journey, a lot of things came up for me as an immigrant or expatriate, however you want to describe it. There were instances of dehumanization and instances where I had to rehumanize myself. And so that is really where this piece grew from a reflection of what it means to be a human being in a nation that calls you a resident alien.
Ah, thank you.
You're welcome.
And we'll hear now from,
Yes.
yes.
Hi, yes. My name is Yaz, and I am a trans non-binary artist. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm located in Lenapehoking here in Harlem, about 20 minutes east of Harlem Stage, I think. And yeah, I'm really excited to present my piece, Ouroboros, which is written for solo voice, 2 additional voices, electric guitar, violin, cello, and electronics. So it's a big piece, which is really exciting. But yeah, so it sets poetry written by a friend of mine, Laura Henriksen, as well as myself. And the title of the piece, Ouroboros, refers to this ancient symbol of a snake eating its own tail, which I think is ancient Egypt or ancient Greece, or both of them sort of had like the same symbol showing up in their culture. So I wrote a poem of the same name, and it sort of has 3 sections, but the main section, or the first section, is telling the story or the memory that I have from childhood, where I was down south visiting my grandmother, who lives in a sort of rural area of South Carolina. And I was outside she has a beautiful garden, and I was outside one day looking for hummingbirds and looking at her flowers and everything. And there was this black snake in the road. And one of her neighbors rushes out of the building, out of his home, and just chops the head off the snake. And that was something it was such a jarring thing for me to see. I was like maybe 6 or 7 at the time. And I ended up having a recurring dream for years after this, that I was the snake getting my head cut off, or I was getting my head cut off. And then ever since I learned like what an Ouroboros was, it just stuck with me, and I've been so fascinated by the concept. It really represents the sort of cyclical nature of life and death, and of recurrent nightmares or haunts, or just things that keep coming back to you.
Nice. Thank you. I think we can hear from Tamar Kalina.
Greetings. The song cycle that I created and will be debuting the end of this month is called Melancholy Ghosts and Other Mothers. And I took text that's actually in the public domain by 3 poets, Lola Ridge, Gwendolyn Bennett, and Bernadette Fawcett. These poems were published between 1920 and 1926, so starting on the heels of the ratification of the women's right to vote in America. And I kind of secretly call it my dark suffragette song cycle. It's a very, I was really struck by the text. As a child, I was, very, kind of like a maudlin baby, loved melancholy and Edgar Allan Poe. And as I discovered these texts, I was thinking how it would have been so wonderful if I had been introduced to their work then. It definitely is in this realm. And two of the women being Black women poets during the Harlem Renaissance. I never really learned about any other poets that were women at that time. Some playwrights, but not the poetry. I was not familiar with the poetry. And just the beauty of this work in its darkness, and the angst, and the confidence, just no apology. The titles are Secrets, Hatred, and Oblivion. And they're beautiful and strong. And I wanted to have a lot of times in my work, I am looking for a way to trace the past, trace myself, connect myself to the past, but to trace my existence through my forebearers in art, in gender, in queerness, just trying to find other folks, because so often the paths that we're, trotting, they're not well trodden, they've just been obscured by like the weeds of racism and misogyny, so, but people have walked these paths before. And I've always been very interested in finding out who came before me. And so this is part of that practice. And that's where the title comes from, Melancholy Ghosts and Other Mothers. And African-American traditions here in the States, we have a type of family that is not defined by blood relation, but by claiming. And that's so in this way, these artists, I think of them as other mothers.
That's incredible. It kind of leads us, what each of you have said really leads us in to the issue that we were going to go further into, which is, what is your inspiration? What is the creative process? And each of you have talked about your own backgrounds, about the kind of social structures that you've been aware of and been in some instances informed by, and in other instances oppressed by. Tamara, I'm just wondering, for those of you who don't know, I've been a fan of Tamara Kali's work for many years, as a composer and a singer. I used to, I don't know if you remember this, Tamara, I would follow you around to clubs, from clubs that you were performing in to MoMA. I mean, you've done so many things, but always definitively you. And you've spoken about this kind of origin of this work. And I'm wondering if there's some larger inspiration or aspect of the creative process that allows you to move through this history as you've done consistently. Can you elaborate on that just a bit?
Well, first and foremost, I create because I'm compelled to.
Okay.
I'm a second generation musician, but I had determined at a young age that I wasn't going to do music. And that's not what my path was. And I attempted that. I majored in English education in college, dropped out after a year. And, by second semester, I was singing coffee houses. Like, I just couldn't get away from it. Because there was this binary of choices, that either you're an artist and you're starving unless you're lucky, or you have a job that is going to secure you financially. It was a lie. There's so many spaces and places that you can exist within that frame of extremes. But, especially at the time I was growing up, certainly no one believed that, and no one knew that. So I had to go about the arduous task of figuring it out on my own. And so, like I said, I'm compelled to create. And what I create is informed by my life, the intersections I exist at as a human being, my experiences, the things I see, the things I hear, what resonates with me. It's a natural progression. And I just stuck with it because, in all honesty, it's the thing that I am most strong in. It is the thing that I know how to do with my eyes closed. And, you know, if I were nothing left but my bottom lip, I would find a way to sing. You know, it's
Well,
like,
we hope that you're not left with
of
just.
course, but you know what I mean? It's like when every cell in your body, this
Uh-huh.
is, you know, and that's what I realized. And so what I'm grateful for at this stage in my practice is that, you know, I've been fortunate enough to, you know, have very lean, scary times, and I stuck to it. And that passion has been able to carry me through. And I think that for those of us who may have developed a practice on the fringes, I think of us as flowers that bloomed in the shadows.
Yeah.
And so our practice can continue to evolve from an authentic place and not be informed by industry or commerce.
Yes.
And there's a space for that, but no one would ever tell you that, because most often they're not familiar, because they're only getting exposed to what is readily accessible, mainstream, you know, force fed or whatever the case may be. But there's a whole world of expression and a practice that you can build that's unique to yourself. And that's where I'm dwelling presently. But truly, the inspiration is life. And I'm just compelled
Yeah.
to create. I guess I'm just built that way.
And we're happy that you have been built that way. So, you know, I think one of the things that both Beth and Harlem Stage have been doing is trying to make sure that there are places for the work, your work, all three of your works, to be recognized. Because for me, it's just like, I find it sinful that there are folks this talented who are not known entities. And I want whatever the world is, and I think outside of the area of commerce that you've talked about, Tamar, because so much of our lives have been ruled by commerce. But I know we want to hear from each of you. So Beth, I know you have some questions as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to ask TK just one more question too, and Pat, please feel free to jump in, you know, on as we go here. Maybe be a little more free form than than we had thought. But TK, I'm curious to just hear about we have two of you are actually performing your own works, and so I want to delve a little bit into that as well. And so I'm wondering, TK, if you could talk about how you're going to approach your work as a performer as well.
So I haven't performed. It's been 3 years to the month that I was last on a stage. And you know, we've been through an entire pandemic. And so coming back to the stage, it's really intense. I'm definitely looking forward to it. I'm staying in a space of prepare so that I don't get saddled with anxiety or anything of that nature. But you know, for me, the stage is an altar. And what I do know is that when I step on it, that I need to be true. And I need to, you know, leave everything there.
Great.
I'll be excited to be rejoining my 5-piece band, which is like an aggressive melodic rock project, and a string quartet is the instrumentation. And so there's just a lot. We've all been through a lot. So I know that catharsis is one of the goals for us individually and personally. But as I said, it's been a really long time since I've had the blessing and the pleasure to be on the stage, and it's an altar. And I just want to honor that moment. There's something sacred about being able to share your soul with people. And I feel like everything around this event, you know, seeing my fellow artists, hearing how they speak about their work, I'm really excited. I just feel a lot of like positive and powerful energy, and I'm just grateful. That's where I'm at in terms of performance.
I love it. And I know that I speak for Pat as well, and just say, like, as producers, we will hold you, you know, in that space where it's, I can imagine there's some anxiety around getting back on the stage after not being on it for 3 years. So we will be there with you. Tanya Ratzwa, I'd love to bring you into the conversation and have you talk a little bit more about the inspiration for the piece, your performance, your instrumentation. I know your trip home was a big inspiration to the creation of this work. So I'd love to just have you talk a little bit about that, your home, and what else you think is
Yeah.
important to know.
Whew. So many powerful things have been said. I feel like I have some chills. Yes, so I am a composer, a singer, and also a healer.
Mm.
My honestly fifth generation. So like my great grandmother was a healer. My great all of the greats were healers. My grandmother on my paternal side was a spirit medium. And so when I was young, from the time of my birth, we would have ceremonies in my home called mapira. And what these are is they're ceremonies of ancestral propitiation, where you brew a special beer in special clay pots over a period of time. And then people gather in the home, and musicians come. And it's a special type of musician called anagwenyambira, people who play the mbira instrument.
Mm.
And it usually starts around sundown, and the music carries you through the night. And there comes a point in the ritual where the atmosphere is so electric and so ready that the spirit medium, homwe, which is kind of loosely translated as a pocket, is so open and just kind of spiritually ready that ancestral spirits begin to possess that body and the ancestors speak. And so I watched my grandmother going through that process time and time again. And so early in my life, especially with my calling to music, it was very clear that, the ancestors had a plan for me. And for me, it was always around kind of healing. My name, Tanyaradzwa, means we have been comforted.
Mm.
And my last name, Tawengwa, means we have been despised.
Yeah.
And so my grandfather chose that name because we didn't have anything. The reason I go by the two names is because, the first name, last name construct is a colonial construct. It's the British who put it in place so that because we had to carry ID cards, right? But before that, we had Nzo Mambano, our totem lineage, which was enough to identify you and your ancestral home and your bloodline. And so now in Zimbabwe, we all carry both, right? But in that name, I always felt compelled to be a healer. And so when I came here for college, I was pre-med. I wanted to be an OBGYN, a doctor. My maternal grandmother was a midwife, so I had a lot of love for expectant mothers.
Of which you are one now.
Of which I am right now. That's why I'm chuckling. And so, like TK, yeah, my father used to ask me, but when are you going to start playing bira? When are you going to start playing bira? That's when I was a child. But I went to a Catholic school that was really established by the colonial regime, and colonizers have, for us indigenous peoples, always attacked our cultural and spiritual practices, and so I was no exception. And so when I went to school speaking about the indigenous rituals we performed, I was chastised by the teachers, almost punished by them. And so I locked away that part of me for a very long time, for many years actually. But my father was the one who kept reminding me, so when are you going to play mbira? When are you going to play mbira? So when I came to the United States for my last 2 years of high school, I went to an international school. I started to dream of my grandmother. She came to me in my dreams every night. She was like, remember who you are. Remember who you are. And so I called my father and I asked him, can you send me a mbira instrument? And so, we believe that, the mbira chooses you, you don't choose to play it. And so when my instrument arrived, specially made just for me, I remember in my dorm room and played all night. No one had ever taught me. I just remembered all the songs and I played it. And, there began my journey into Marimuka, my own wilderness. So, this is a way of answering even the instrumentation of my piece. And so my piece, it is piano and mbira. And it's very interesting because these are two instruments that are very close to me. I started to learn piano when I was 8 years old at the Catholic missionary school. And so the first two movements are piano and the last two are mbira. And it kind of mirrors that journey of, starting on this instrument and trying to find my voice and then kind of remembering who I am. But also I'm performing alone. And the reason I chose to do that is because the wilderness is a place you enter alone. And I don't know how to explain it. I wonder if maybe there's avid hikers. I love hiking, and that feeling of going on a hiking trail alone, and kind of walking through the thick woods. That's the closest feeling I can share to this journey in Marimuka, and in some ways I feel like I'm in that journey right now. Transitioning into motherhood. Um, and I've always found that I soothe myself by singing to myself, humming, kind of cooing. I got that from my mother and my grandmother on my mom's side. And so that's the ritual that's going to happen next week, that personal ritual I'm going to share. And yes, Beth, to answer your question, I have been going home actually. I mean, home is home. I'm not even American just yet. So I have to go. But for the last 14 years, I've been going home to go through my rites of passage and my initiation rituals and my learning rituals. And, I've done things like deep immersive journeys into the woods to learn about healing plants with my elders. I have spent time with my teachers, just learning, relearning, unlearning, healing. These colonial wounds are deep, and so all of that comes into this piece. All of that comes alive. This piece really was channeled. The music came to me in one sitting, and it came at a very emotionally intense time because one of my family members was applying for a visa to come here and it was denied. And I was so fed up, with the dehumanization of these immigration processes and how they're for some, not for all. And, how did we get here that we treat each other this way? And at that moment, I kind of just wished I was a bird and I could just fly over a border, like, so that's really where this music comes from. And funny enough is that issue was quickly resolved. I happened to be on faculty at a very, what people call an elite institution. And so I made a phone call and then they got their visa. So it's crazy how it's not a fair system. It's not a just system. It's for some. And not for all. So though I was happy that they came, I wondered, if I didn't have an advocate, really a white advocate, right, who sat in a position of power, would that have been the outcome if it was just me speaking? So all of these things are imbued in the music.
It's remarkable, my dear. And anybody who's listening to this, if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, I don't know, you may not be healed, because I think that is a part of what each of you are saying. So Yaz, we definitely want to hear from you and understand beyond that snake and the kind of inspiration that you've brought to the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, that's my poetry in the piece. And then so Laura Henriksen's poems come from two chapbooks that she wrote. The first being October Poems from 2020, and last year she put out a chapbook called Help Me, I'm in Hell. And they really deal with like sort of figures of fear, like different animals or creatures that are throughout history, figures of fear, like the chimera or black dogs and things like that. But they're also dealing with the feeling of being haunted and being haunted by love and being haunted by memory. And I think like those two ideas, so with Laura's poems and then my poems, I felt like there was a real dialogue between what we were sort of thinking about. My poem is interspersed into 3 songs throughout. So it starts with mine, and then there's 2 songs using Laura's text, and then there's the middle section of my poem, and then 2 more songs, and then my poems, the end of my poems, the end of my piece. But yeah, besides that, this piece is definitely partly an homage to my favorite horror sounds and soundtracks. I don't know if you can see behind me, I have like this whole wall of posters and artwork from different horror movies that I love. Every October, I watch at least 1 horror movie a day. It's definitely like my favorite time of year, and my favorite genre of work to really engage with. So doing research for this piece was definitely a lot of fun. Like, I wouldn't even consider it research. It was just fun. Just like watching different films, also really exploring other sort of niche or subgenres of music that can also be sort of fear-inducing or anxiety-inducing, like really industrial stuff, really noisy power electronics, and things that are just, I don't know, they're so overwhelming, and so like filled with dread that I was just really interested in what that type of sound and what that type of music can really do to you as a listener. Yeah, it's just really just interesting to think about discomfort and how that has a place in art. I don't think I've ever like really thought about that before. So that was really interesting for me to think about what are ways that you can not only induce like fear or anxiety, but that feeling of discomfort, that feeling of not feeling quite like things are just slightly off, that kind of feeling that I get when I watch horror. And like the reason I love watching horror is that feeling that you get that you can't really get from other things, besides things that you're just naturally afraid of. Like I'm terrified of bugs, so I've been running.
Me too.
Yeah, I've been running like all summer from the spotted lanternflies that we're getting now. They're just like horrid to me. But yeah, so definitely just thinking about how horror really pushes along narratives in or like the sound in horror, the horror genre really pushes along narratives in a really specific way. And then also something I love thinking about is how much you can tell from a specific region or time period based on the type of horror that is being produced during that time. It's so interesting to like, if you look at the history of horror, the genre, you can literally track what the society's biggest fears are or what the social issues are by looking at what people are afraid of at that time and the types of horror movies that are being made during that time. Like if you think about like the 1970s, 73 is when Roe versus Wade was passed, and then after that you start getting a real a fear of children and of pregnancy and childbirth, and then you get movies like The Omen, and then you get to like post 9/11, you start seeing more conspiracy theories, doomsday, zombies, things like that are more of a global horror. And I think right now we're seeing a lot of things about generational trauma, about cyclical horrors, in a lot of different ways, you know, with mental health, but also with things like slavery and racism. So that's where you get Out, or Hereditary, or the any of the Jordan Peele films, basically, and a lot of other things coming out now more recently. So that's definitely where my head was at in terms of this piece, was thinking about the more recent era of horror, but also looking back at things that I really love and think are sort of timeless, or cyclical, because they come back. Like I think people are always going to be afraid of, like we mentioned, bugs. People are always going to be afraid of ghosts or spirits that are not the friendly kind, I think. So yeah, this piece is really dealing with a lot of self-referential content or material, but also sort of life and death and recurrent nature of traumas and things like that I have always been interested in. And it's been really great to figure out how to bring all those things in together into one thing.
I love it, because You know, what's so interesting to me about this is that while each of your inspirations are different, there seems to be such a link that for me, what I'm hearing is that this idea of affirmation of self is a form of resistance. It's a form of acknowledging the environmental threats, the threats of racism, of society. And we are at a time like none other that I've experienced. And I've been around quite a while. So I think this is a monumental moment. And I think the fact that we can have each of you on the stage at Harlem Stage is just amazing. And I think what we want to do is very briefly, because we do want to have an opportunity for those people who want to have Q&A and have questions of you to ask. But I thought if each of you could just very briefly say, and some of you have already talked about it, what do you want the audience to come away with? And, you know, while I'm talking about the audience that's going to be with us at Harlem Stage, I'm also talking about your communication with your audience across the board. What do you want people to be able to come away with from this experience? Anybody can jump in and say.
And that's always an interesting question, right? Because I think first and foremost, I mean, I never kind of project how I want to be received by others because it's a personal journey, right? Like how people react. I know that I will be happy to see people again and to be in that space. But because of the specificity of like the text, I'm hoping that people will go away with an interest in these poets and that perhaps it might spark interest in origin stories in general, because we are in a place in society where information is so easily accessible. But at the same time, people don't really take the time to learn things. They just look for affirmation of what they already believe. So I hope that it can spark the interest in research and learning about, you know, these artists from a different time, learning about, you know, the various ways that women showed up in society, even without the right to vote as a citizen, you know what I mean? Like, because that's one thing as we are having these discussions around visibility and representation. I often feel like there's almost this conflation with existence,
Yeah.
you know, like erasure and non-existence, you know, like even though we're saying the term erasure, I hear people talk in terms of first time ever recently. And it's like, no, we're just unfamiliar.
Yeah.
It's about like the broadening of a horizon. Like we're human beings and we've existed in all states of the forms that we exist in today. It's just some of us were not seen.
That's right.
So trying to reach back and find and uncover shadow histories, things of that nature. It would be great if the work could inspire that.
I love that, because I do think that kind of experience is, and we talk about that at Harlem Stage, diverse art is transformative art. And I do believe that hearing these stories is a kind of education that can transform your thinking and make you understand in different ways. So each of you, I would love to hear from the two of you remaining before we turn to Q&A from our audience, because we do have people who we hope are eager to come and yes.
Yeah, I think for me, when I was writing the piece, I was thinking a lot about that like really generational trauma and how I think like now people are really starting to do that work with reckoning with that and the transformative power there is to be found in doing that. But I also think something that I am really interested in is really learning to or accepting or acknowledging when things are not comfortable and learning to sit in that space when things are not or things are not comfortable, when things are overwhelming. Since speaking for myself, I know like there's a lot of times where I feel very anxious about things, about society, or just even walking outside and my dog is like eating a bug or something, just like daily or just like everyday sort of things that are recurrent, that are anxiety inducing, that are dreadful, scrolling the news, things like that. And really sort of like reckoning with that, or just learning to sit in that space and feel the discomfort rather than sort of push it away.
Great.
Yeah, I would say for me, similar to what TK said, it's not something that I want to prescribe in terms of how I would like audiences to feel. I never know, but I would like to extend an invitation. It really is what I'm offering in this cycle. Really is a ritual, and rituals work when everyone aligns in spirit and heart, and so I would like to invite everyone as they watch me kind of journey within myself to journey within themselves and have the courage to face what they see.
Yeah, I think we're ready for the journey. So thank you all for the conversation. What we're going to do, I've got Eric Oberstein and Uni Mayoka here from our staff to field some of the questions. And I think that you all will share anything that our audiences have shared with you so that we can direct those to the artists.
Hi, everyone. So our audiences have been shy thus far.
Oh, no.
So this would be the moment to drop those questions into the chat or the Q&A. I will go off screen and will be a disembodied voice, but I will help deliver your questions to our wonderful panelists this evening. So now's the time. You have this incredible group of artists before you. Please drop those questions in the chat or Q&A right now.
And in the meantime, I would love to thank our lead commissioner, Lynn Loaker. She's on the BMP board, was a board chair for us and an absolutely beloved member of our community. And also Marian Godfrey, who has come in with additional support for the project, also beloved board member and member of the BMP community. So thank you both so very much for believing in this project and these artists. And I can't wait to share their work with you.
Great. And I know some of those names, so it's good to hear that folks who've been around for a long time are still believers and supporters of the work, because we couldn't do what we do without them. For us, for almost all of our public programs, the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York State Council on the Arts, and the Department of Cultural Affairs have supported this and so many of the other efforts that we're doing. And I just want to make sure that you all are sharing on your social media the fact that you will be at Harlem Stage. And I do hope that those of you who might not, who might be shy in this forum in terms of asking questions will come out and take this journey with us. We've been invited. You all have extended the invitation, and that is remarkable. And we want to go into what's also wonderful about this is that each of you have a very different story and a very different experience, but we're all connected to it, and I feel that that is what enriches us. I think that it's kind of like the dilemma with the lantern, the red lantern fly that you mentioned, because what is wonderful about them is when you see them, they're incredibly beautiful. And then you're instructed to kill them. It's like, ugh, because of their danger to the environment and to our trees and plants. But that's a part of the kind of paradox of almost everything, that inherent in the beauty is also something that can be inherently dangerous. So we want to invite everyone to join us for that. And I'm hoping that while others may come in with questions, we do want you all to know that tomorrow night we will be doing at Harlem Stage live. And I know that that has been, we've started that project, and we are now going to launch the Black Arts Movement Examined program that we are doing with Carl Hancock Rux. Carl has actually designed and created a program which will open on this Friday and go through the entire season. And I hope that all of you as artists are coming out for those programs as well. And then all of the audiences who are listening to this webinar are also coming to both you all and as many things as they can come to live, because I do believe the live experience is kind of like the healing rich. It has been that for my entire life. That is the healing ritual of the arts that I feel like I have been more than I could ever be on my own because of what you all have shared with me. So again, we are thrilled to be able to do this. And I don't know, Eric, if
Have a bunch of
Yes, we
questions.
do have
Yeah.
questions. Thank you, Pat,
Oh,
and thank you
okay.
for all the information you've shared, which is great. I'm going to start with Danya's question, and they ask, can you each talk a little bit more about your writing process? Yaz was talking about sitting with the discomfort. Sometimes it's difficult to create during such moments. So how do you allow yourself the space to heal and grow when things around you are so difficult? Tanya Rodswell was talking about channeling the piece and all in one sitting. I'm curious to hear more about these processes. So whomever would like to start, thank you, Donia, for your question.
I can hop in real quick. Thank you for this question. You know, I'm a kind of classically trained composer, right, by education, and so process for me has been an evolution, especially liberating my process, coming from really what seems like two disparate musical expressive languages. So our indigenous way of music making, and then the sort of Western classical way I was trained in from the age of 8. And so process for me has been really a journey of self-liberation, because I was always, especially in my training, fighting with the score, really fighting and trying to find ways to express what it is that was within me, in my soul, in my spirit. But every time I would try and put it through this, translation mechanism of Western classical kind of semantics or syntax, things would fall away. And so, I did talk about channeling, but I think one of the biggest things I could say in my composer process is how I have released the score as a need to kind of express myself. If I'm working with ensemble, I work with charts if I need to, but mostly anyone who works with me works the way, learns music from me the way I learned it from my grandmothers, which is I will sing it to them and they will play it or they will. So I think that has been, in my journey of process and voice, one of the most liberating things I've done for myself.
I have choral classical training because I too was in parochial institutions. I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 12th grade, and I credit it with teaching me the art of resistance. And so I use charts and scores simply as a means of communication. It's like the written word. But I too very much am steeped in the oral tradition of African-American music tradition. My father was a musician, and just music being a part of my life from in utero. So I definitely hear things, like my ear is my chief and my voice, but I use logic. I do a lot of film score composing, and I started a chamber ensemble like in the late 90s. And so I would do my charts by hand, but that's like super time consuming because I'm a slow reader and writer in that way. So I really just use it to communicate, to get the music out to people who are best suited to play it in that way. But working in digital audio workstation has really helped me get the stuff out faster because I hear everything. I'm definitely like divining, you know what I mean? Like, so I need a tool that I can get everything out if I'm, maybe playing the bass a little, playing some guitar. But it's really great to work in a digital audio workstation so I can kind of like play all the parts at once as they're coming to me.
Mm.
So that is one way that's a helpful way I work. So it's like a little bit of everything. And with inspiration, you never know when it's coming.
Mm.
So, there can be several pieces that will make the whole later on, but they can be a bunch of things, anything from playing a part on the keyboard or the piano, or, 3 o'clock in the morning, mumbling some barely intelligible melody into the voice notes. And, everything comes together in the end. And then spending time like dedicated time sitting and in my space here and composing. So things come to you how they come to you. For me, I'm definitely an inspiration based writer. I'll start with a concept. So there's a certain amount of like musing and intellectual work that happens ahead. And then once I kind of imagine the world that the sound is going to exist in, then the inspiration of the actual composition can come at any point, and there are a bunch of tools that I'll use.
Great. Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Janya. Thank you so much for being here. Janya is a collaborator of mine. But yeah, so for me, just thinking about like writing through discomfort or periods of time where it's been hard for me to write. So this time last year, I actually was pretty sick. I'm just now starting to feel more myself. So I wrote a large portion of this piece actually like while I was not feeling very great. And I think for me, it's actually like pretty hard to actually like sit down and write music or sit down and make music or even think about being creative when, there's so many other things that like you can be anxious about or be discomforted in. Like last year, I had a lot of like really bad health anxiety. It was just hard to like do anything. So like music was not at like the forefront of my mind at all. But I think like what really worked for me or what's really helpful for me, just in general, but especially in those times of those times is really like the act of researching. Like I really sit for a long period of time with just words and numbers and statistics and just reading everything I can about whatever I'm thinking about or whatever I'm writing. So like for this piece, that meant I got to watch a million movies, horror movies, or I got to listen to like 3 hours of power violent music and like blow out my speakers and like destroy my eardrums. But I think like the act of researching and just being more, to me, I think research is like a very creative thing, or it can be a creative thing, but for some reason we don't think of it that way. Especially like with archives, like, when you're creating an archive or you're pulling things from an archive, you're very intentional about it. And there's sort of like an act of creativity in just doing that. And like choosing the things that you want to piece together. But I think like that process is something that I definitely fall back on when I'm feeling like writing the piece itself, like just actually sitting down and opening up Sibelius and putting in the notes and all that like very tedious thing, which I also like don't really enjoy, and tend to write a lot more open scored things or things that are not too many like oral communicative scores. I'm starting to do more of that. I play steel pan as well, and that tradition is completely oral. So whenever I'm writing for steel pan, that's usually where it like how that happens. But I'm starting to think about that more in my other works that I write. But yeah, definitely writing things more open and definitely communicating a lot with the performers if I'm able to. For this piece, my fiance is actually playing electric guitar. So we sat down and I like Zoom called him and texted him and called him like every single time I was like writing a chord and was like, does this work on guitar? So just like very open scored, like Tanya Radzwa and TK have mentioned as well, but also like that research and just really like mapping things out and doing everything on paper first or in my head, and just figuring that out before I actually like go in and start writing the piece. It definitely makes everything like a lot easier.
Thank you. Eric, is there another question that we can get to?
Indeed, indeed. This is a twofer because two of the audience questions are aligned in many ways. So these are from Julie and from Heather. Heather asks, I'd love to learn about some of the upcoming projects each of the fantastic artists has in store after the song cycles premiere at the end of the month. And then Julie's question is, do you have a work that you want to create but haven't had a chance yet? So aligned, I think. But yeah, curious, both Julie and Heather are curious what comes next. And maybe I'll throw in my own question to that of how did your process in writing your pieces for song cycles maybe inspire or yeah, bring about dreams of new possibilities beyond this project?
I think it might be a little obvious to say that I really want to score a horror film.
I know, so I've been thinking the whole time, it's like, we gotta get you here into Hollywood.
Yeah, I'm like manifesting it. I've been like dreaming about it like forever. But definitely that. And then in terms of like things I'm actually working on soon, I actually can't say a whole lot, but there's a lot of stuff I'm working on this spring through January and March that I'm really excited about. Some really cool collaborations and multidisciplinary stuff that is really exciting. But more stuff that I can actually share about. I am putting out an album of work that is for violin, voice, and electronics. And it's all performed by me. And there are like pieces by several other composers, including Janya, who asked the question earlier. And it's also an audiovisual album. So there's going to be videos for all of the pieces. And it's been really great. I've been putting this together since before the pandemic. So 2019, I think, is the first piece I commissioned. And it's all just like home recorded here in my bedroom, which was also like really great. Like this whole pandemic, basically just like recording and working on that album. And I'm really excited for everyone to hear it. That's coming out, I'm not sure, but this year, in the next couple of months. And then another thing I have in New York in December 12th at CUNY is a portrait concert shared with Yoshi Weinberg, who's another non-binary composer and flautist. And we're both premiering new works on that program, both dealing with sort of our gender identities and how sort of how we feel we've changed and grown, and how society has changed and grown to react to non-binary individuals, and that being accepted or more acknowledged, or maybe not, in the society over the past couple of years. Yeah, a lot of exciting things that I'm really happy to share soon, but I can't say too much about.
So great. Yeah, I'm so excited to hear all of these upcoming things. How about you, Tanya Radzwa?
Well, what's next? Professionally, I would say, so I have pretty exciting commission coming up with Carnegie Hall that I'm looking forward to. I do a lot of work with kids, and so it's an orchestral commission for their kids program. And so that's very exciting considering where I am now. I have been working over the last, honestly, almost a decade on a musical, audiovisual, and scholarly project called Mwezi. Mwezi means moon month and menstrual cycle in Chivanu. And it's about my rite of passage into womanhood. And so it is an amazing, in-depth, collaborative piece that I've taken many great journeys to put together. So that music and writing should be coming out soon in 2023. I think the question, what piece would you like to make that you haven't had a chance to make yet? Whew. I mean, I don't know. I feel like things come when I'm ready, but I also do believe in the power of manifestation. So, yes, I really feel like that film score is going to happen for you in a heartbeat because you said it. And I'm cheering you on. But I really am looking forward to, again, like, really stepping into my voice, stepping into my power. I had a really wonderful and transcendent experience just 2 weeks ago with my vocal ensemble as part of a week-long residency at Princeton. And it was really beautiful because I was able to do the music the way I wanted to do the music, which means that I was able to bring in musicians from home. This is a big thing. So sometimes with this kind of really ancestrally driven spiritual sound, you need the people who can make the sounds you need made. And it takes resources, right? To be able to bring bodies. I know, Beth, we talked about it, from one place in the world to another. So what I hope for is just, the ability to be able to bring my musicians consistently from home so that I can give what needs to be given the way it should be given. But yeah, I think the biggest project upcoming for me is becoming a mom.
Yes. Well, congratulations on that, darling.
Thank you. Thank you.
TK, you want to close us out? We're probably going to close up shop here pretty soon, but let's hear what you have coming up. A lot,
I have a couple of things in the pipeline. I have another digital opera commission with Catapult Opera that will probably be out in the early part of next year. I'm in the process of now moving on to orchestrating my first compositional work for the stage, which is a theatrical stage piece that will be directed by Bill T. Jones and premiering at the Perlman Arts Center down at Ground Zero for fall 23.
Fantastic.
And I've also been working on an orchestral concert that highlights the journey and the fight for a true full realization of citizenry for African American people in United States, and that traces it from abolition until now. There's a certain, and it's funny because I went, I majored to be an educator of sorts, and I realized at a certain point in my career, in the beginning, I was just expressing, it felt good, it was like a very singular kind of like ego driven in that it was subjective. But as I got older and I saw how this music thing was taking me to different places in the world, I was able to have interaction and exchange with people that I probably would have never met or seen before. And in turn, they were having an interaction and exchange with someone they may have never met or seen before. And that I was representing the experience of a people. And I thought to myself, I can be a reference by default, or I could do it with intention. And so part of that is, again, origin stories, giving a frame of context for a lot that's going on. And so, as someone who's Afro-Indigenous and, who's descended from enslaved Africans brought to this country and the Indigenous who were here, there's a lot of, funny enough, that people just don't know about us. And I was thinking about the American orchestral canon and how African-American folk have a great part in it, but it's not spoken on, and people kind of thinking about civil rights starting in the 60s, but it started after abolition. So just trying to bring a wider focus to the history here on this land, just in my work, because people don't, and also I think that Yaz and I have this in common based on where she told me her grandma's from, but being a woman of Gullah Geechee heritage and just feeling like I don't see enough people of and from the community sharing, like some folks just tend to roll. I think that for people who come from really old cultures, whether it's the diaspora, whether it's Asian, Africa, whatever, you kind of you know spiritually that you shouldn't have to explain yourself. You know that you are human, you know you have a long history, you have culture. But sometimes we have to let folks know. And I think that when you have the intention, as opposed to being forced into the position of explaining yourself as a labor to someone else, that's a better space. And so I've been finding my way in that regard.
This is so
Beautiful.
exciting. I can't wait because you all have inspired us. And you know, harlemstage.org, you can get your tickets. I think that Uni has put in a link in the chat so that people who want to get their tickets can do it through that link. But again, I'm so looking forward. And you know, with the projects that you all have coming up, I hope people can come in and see you all at Harlem Stage, where the tickets are very affordable. Pretty soon, they won't be able to get in to afford to be able to see you all because so many people will be clamoring to go on the journeys that you all are leading us on. And we're incredibly grateful for that. Eric, is there anything else that we should say as we close this out, other than to thank these incredible composers, their brilliant work, and I want to call it that, to arrive at the destinations that they are moving toward, and allowing us to come with them is one of the most wonderful things in the world. So thank you all for that. And Beth, to say how happy I am that we finally got to do this collaboration and partnership. And we're so happy that you came to us with this.
Pat, I'm thrilled with the partnership. I'm thrilled with this incredible group of composers who are going to blow our minds on October 28th. So